hunger can be found in your darkest moments, and that's what we wanted to talk about. Think about how you feel after a trip. Think about how you feel after a session on your project when you didn't send. Yeah. And even if you do send, I'm sure people aren't 100% happy with themselves. I'm sure people aren't 100% complete. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep climbing, right? Everyone's hungry. Everyone wants to keep doing more. But the hungriest moment is right after that failure. The hungriest moment is right after that failure. That's what you want to be thinking about. That's what you want to be thinking about for all of your sessions.
Tim, my dude, how's it going, man?
Josh, what's up? It's going all right, man.
I'm laughing because I did like a sudden clap to start the podcast because we were just talking about climbing. I was like, God damn it, Tim, gotta start the podcast. Tim, it's 2024. Actually, it's not 2024. It's before 2024. But when this drops, it's the new year. So I'm gonna just preempt you and be like, Happy New Year, Tim. Tim, my dude.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Everybody, Happy New Year. It's the new year.
Yeah.
Who knew?
I'm psyched. I love the new year. Actually, Tim, when this drops, I'll have had my birthday. I will be officially 38, which is old as fuck. And
Wow.
yeah, and so for me, the new year is always a big deal because it's like got that new year feel of it, everything's brand new. You know, here's your chance, and that's also my birthday. So big, always a always a big time of reflection for me and a chance to change everything, which never actually happens. But maybe all for January. January I'll be good, and then February back to my old ways. But yeah,
Yeah. Do people like to I feel like people like to pretend that, New Year's resolutions or well, I don't know, everyone probably does New Year's resolutions and then like shit talks them. I find New Year's resolutions to be profoundly important. I think the time to reflect, but then the time to, which goes hand in hand with our topic, grow some hunger, and get some desire and truly, gear up for training or gear up for goals or whatever business thing you want to do. I feel like everybody gets psyched for New Year's, and we should really take that seriously. I think it's super cool to just be actually inspired by yourself. Nobody's telling you anything. It's a new year, man. It's like you have a new opportunity. It's
all
sick.
right, I like that. I was just kind of being doing the classic joke of, oh, like we're all going to do New Year's resolutions and then it doesn't matter, it's just going to be done, because I actually do take it super seriously. So thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
I wasn't really talking about the feelings I get are that it's those moments of reflection where you just get so deep in the weeds of day to day, you're just doing whatever, and then you have this moment where or a couple of weeks often for winter break, you take a step back and you're like, oh wait, like, yeah, what do I want, like what am I hungry for, and are my actions aligned with that? And typically they aren't, and that's just natural. You start veering off of course. And oh, dude, my buddy has the best example. I can't remember what he calls it. Something about like blind navigating on a sailboat. And he did a bunch of sailing. And what he talked about is how you set your course, and by the stars or whatever navigation works, and then the clouds come in. You can't see,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
but you just keep your course the way it was while you could see the sky. And then
Right.
the clouds clear, and now it's time to like check your check your navigation again. Did I go off course while there was clouds? And so I feel like these are kind of like these moments where, okay, I wanted this, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, am I actually headed that way? And so yeah, New Year is a time to refocus, find that hunger, that desire of what you want. And yeah, that'll tie in later to the podcast topic. Good
Dude,
tie in,
that's so
Tim. Good
cool.
job, man.
That's so cool. The clouds just come in, and yeah, that's totally true. You can set your course, and then you can still stay on the course, but you might not know that you're on the course, so you might have to check a couple times. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah. And if you are trying to build a new habit, I encourage this book that's like the international bestseller called Atomic Habits. I think I've talked about it on here before. It's by a guy named James Clear. It's just good. It's popular for a reason. It has very useful ways to start a habit. And the trick is just, it's a little spoiler alert, but it's a nonfiction, so there's no real spoilers, is typically to just make it really easy and rewarding. So you don't say I'm going to go run a marathon or even train for a marathon. You say I'm going to put on my shoes this morning. Like what's the goal is the easiest thing possible. Or you can often do habit combining where you say, okay, I only get a cup of coffee if I put on my shoes to go running. And you don't even say like go running. And I like it because once you've got the ball rolling, it's so much easier to just keep going. And I actually had this, I had this happen a few days ago. I was like, oh, I need to climb. Like I need to train. It's been a few days. I've been eating, eating Christmas cookies, not training. And I just said, you know what? You're just going to go out there and you're just going to warm up your shoulders and fingers. Like you don't even have to climb. And I had a great session, dude. I had a great session. And it just kind of blew me away where when I set the bar that low, like just do 2 sets of shoulder exercises. And I did them and I was like, oh, let's keep it going. And yeah, so there you go. That's our New Year's tip for getting the new habit. I like that.
That's awesome. Dude, when I was that reminds me, I don't train like this, definitely not right now and definitely not in the last couple of years, but when I was living in the Bay Area and I was, a teenager, I wasn't going to school. I had tons of time. I was just working as a coach and a part-time route setter, and all I cared about was training. I mean, I trained probably 8 to 12 hours a day almost every single day. Like that I was a madman. And I would do 3 phases. I would do 3 phases of training almost every single day. And the worst and the hardest part was the climbing. It was hard to repetitively climb for about 6 hours every single day, and my warm up would be really long. And I don't know. I think being a kid, you're psyched to go into the gym, but I think also you realize I realized as I got older that it's not like that anymore. Like when you're a kid, you just go. But the thing that was really interesting to me was that if I just started warm up, I would just go in session. I wouldn't even have sometimes a plan for the day. I would be like, dude, today's gonna suck. Like I'm not gonna follow my plan or anything. My skin hurts too bad. I'm way too sore. I'm way too tired. Like, of course, I'm not gonna be able to session as hard as I did the other day. And then I would just start warming up, and no matter what, I would get psyched and I would just continue. And that is so underrated just to get started in your warm up, especially in climbing, because climbing is painful. Climbing is super painful, but you can get so much out of I mean, dude, I would climb like 30 hours a week and just like going into the just skin pain every single day. And my skin would hurt most warm ups. I would say 70% of my sessions were painful, like really painful. But I would warm up and just keep going. And man, just getting started in the warm up was just the key. It was so, so good.
Tim, I love your path to success as a pro climber, but I always worry about, okay, kids, you need to drop out of school and then just climb. And I always just think, what's interesting though, is that what the podcast is always about, our meta theme is this: how do you go from good to great? And this to me is part of that, where you always have to find your own way. It's not necessarily dropping out. Like if you did what Tim did, you would not be Tim because you are not Tim. And Connor Herson, he's in Stanford or wherever. Like, does that mean that you need to go and be a mechanical engineer at Stanford to climb 9A trad? It's like, no, but everyone finds their own way. And so I always want to put this like caveat, like, hey guys, like, my kids are listening to this 5 years later. Do not drop out of school and try to be like Tim. But if that's what you're driven to do and you really look internally and that's who you are, then that is your path to greatness. And so both like congratulations to you, Tim, on finding your own path and being successful on your journey. And no one do do what Tim did. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad that you kind of said it that way. And for those of you who are new to the podcast or maybe don't know, me or anything, because I'm sure we're always getting new listeners. Yeah, I dropped out of high school, and as a coach, I've always gotten that question, especially from younger people, like, what should I do? What's my path? Like, you made it work, and I'm like, whoa, 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 let's talk about why I did what I did, right? Like I was already flunking out of high school, like I didn't put that much effort into it. So by the time I was in senior year, I wasn't going to graduate. So am I gonna put another 2.5 years into summer schools after this to keep going, or am I going to try to work really, really hard and think really deeply about how to get my life together in a different way? And not everybody's geared like that. Not everybody has. I had a really interesting life, and I'm sure everyone's got interesting lives, but my school thing was never going to work out, and I knew that from probably when I was 5 years old. Like I moved 9 elementary schools, I think, by the time I was finished with elementary school. So, like every time I moved, I was like, it was about friends, it was about being accepted into societies, it was about finding interests. It wasn't about school, man. I didn't care. So everybody's got a different perspective, everybody's got different values, everybody's got different plans. And so there's no one path. I think the world has kind of shaped us into following things and, telling us that these things might lead you to these types of successes, but that's not necessarily true either. And everybody's got to think for themselves and everybody's got to make their own choices.
Yeah, I'll tie this into what we were saying about 2024 being a way to decide what you're really hungry for. And I'm also going to tie into that whole navigation thing where you just set a course and then every once in a while you look up at the cloud or at the stars and say, do I need to change my approach now? Because the truth is that things are just never linear. And you may have a goal like do this climb or win this comp, and what happens is it's just you might still get there, and then you read these stories about people and they write this nice story where it just looks like, oh, and then this step happened and then you went to this step and all of a sudden you won the Olympics. But it's a zigzag of setbacks like injuring your knee or something like that, where you think that you're on the path and then you zag instead of zig, and then all of a sudden you're off in left field, and then you say, okay, what do I need to do now? I'm still pointing in that direction. I still have the thing I really want and am looking for, but what do I do today? And I think that, again, this ties into our topic later, is just knowing what it is and why it is that you want that helps you always show up wherever you are on your journey with intention and with the best try hard for that moment, for that day. And so, I think that's a powerful story where it's just knowing what you want, heading for it, but then you're never actually derailed. You just are on a different course for now. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
that's
mean, the
pretty,
analogy
yeah,
there is, you're sailing a boat. You know where you're supposed to go. You put a dot on the map and you're saying, "All right, here's my map. Here's where I'm going. Okay, I follow this thing." And then you hit land. And you're like, "What? I didn't know there was land on the way. What are you going to do? Give
that's
up?
how
Are you
America
going
was discovered, Tim.
to You're trying to get somewhere else and you hit
Yeah.
land. You're like, "Oh shit, this is not where I was trying to go." But no, you hit land or you hit shallows or you hit rough waters or whatever. You changing your destination, that's not the right approach. You keep your destination the same. You go the course, and if you run into things, you make the best out of the course, right? You figure out, okay, am I supposed to get around this land? Is that possible? Is that too hard? Am I supposed to, get off here and walk the land and then build another boat at the end? Or what? That's how we approach life, right? We pick a destination that we're sure and we're happy with, and we make it a smart choice to find a destination, and we go by any means necessary, right? And we figure it out and we do the best that we can, right? The obstacles are gonna be there. Everyone's gonna run through obstacles, so we figure it out, right? That's the analogy that I think about.
Well, check this out, Tim. Carlo Traversy, he wanted to do the Dark Side Project, and he did the Dark Side Project. You like that segue, Tim?
I like
Yeah,
that.
this so this was blowing up on Instagram. Carlo just posted that he did the first ascent of. I don't know if this is clear from the post, but it's basically a low and left sit start to the Force, which is a famous V9 on this boulder in Camp 4 that is iconic. It has Thriller on it, which is a famous V10. And Carlo, yeah, he writes in the post that he saw it. I mean, he saw it 10 years ago. He saw the boulder first time 20 years ago when he was probably awed by Thriller and the Force. And I know about this project, and I've seen this project tried many times throughout the year. I actually saw Jimmy Webb get extremely close on it maybe 5 years ago now. He was so close. Conditions are just difficult for that climb, to say the least. But I wrote this in my comment on Instagram to Carlo. I think this is a huge, huge deal. And it may not be a huge deal in the realm of climbing as a whole. He graded at V16. We'll see if that stands or gets downgraded or upgraded. Actually, I take it back. Yosemite never gets upgraded. Actually, that's not true. Midnight Lightning was put up at V7, and now people think it's V8 and it's actually probably V9. Anyways, I think it's a huge deal because Bouldering in Yosemite has seen these different eras, and actually, I'll start there with Midnight Lightning. There was plenty of bouldering that came before it. It's not like it's was the first boulder, but I would argue that Midnight Lightning in some ways represents this modern bouldering, this hard and tall. It's 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 a challenge unto itself. You know, it's impressive. It sits right there in the campground. There's a reason why it's so famous. It's because it's accessible and right there and beautiful. One Calc did that in the 70s, which is insane. And then you can see this next era of bouldering, and a lot of stuff happens. So just, forgive me for the broad history brush, but Jerry Moffat comes along and does Dominator, which is like literally, I don't know, 200 feet away from Midnight Lightning, but it's heinously hard and thin and overhung. And it's only like 10 feet tall, or is it even 10? No, you can it's like 8 feet tall. But
Yeah, yeah, it's like 10 feet tall.
yeah, but it's like you can see how different that is from something like Midnight Lightning, but represent this try hard, burly style that was being developed on the, you know, in the schoolroom on, what was going to become the moon board, basically. These like really strong fingers and that love of movement and strength on a smaller scale. And then we had a lot of development in Yosemite. Gosh, I don't know, Randy Perot, Tommy Caldwell, Carlo, Keenan, Takahashi, Jimmy, tons of people have been putting up hard stuff in the valley since then. And I would say some of the more modern style lines are actually, I would say like Dogwood or Yabo Roof. I think maybe Tommy did both of those, but like they're taller. They're in that like V12 range. So they're not just like these low ball kind of heinous things. And so there's been a lot of progress in Yosemite, but there's a joke that there's nothing harder than V12 in Yosemite, and it's because there kind of isn't. Like there is some harder stuff, and there's they've Carlo and Jimmy have put up some 13s and 14s in recent history, but this to me represents this kind of capstone of what this era has been, where it's hard, it's technical, and it's stunning and tall and beautiful. And it's right in the middle of freaking Camp 4. Like, I just know that when people look back 50 years, that's going to be the era. They're going to say, okay, like, this was what happened in that era. Carlo came and did the dark side. And yeah, I mean, you can tell I think it's freaking awesome. And again, I know this may not have massive resonance outside of Yosemite bouldering, but dude, it's freaking Yosemite. And I think it's incredible. Just congrats, Carlo. Psyched for you, man.
Yeah, congrats, Carlo. I want to step back to just hear you go through that history because it's so sick, dude. Like, I mean, I've only been to Yosemite a couple of times, and I feel the history every time I go there. And I think a lot of climbers know that, even if they haven't been to Yosemite. Everyone knows what Midnight Lightning is, and everybody, if you're a climber, you know what Midnight Lightning is, and if you don't, maybe you're not a climber yet, and you should figure out what Midnight Lightning is. And Dominator too. I mean, I tried Dominator recently, and it is so hard. Like for the grade that it's said, even for like the holds are actually, in my opinion, not that bad. But it's like the movement. It's the type of movement. It makes it so hard to do. Like it just feels like I would have to come back and spend tons of time on it. I feel like the certainty of it is there. Like I feel like I would for sure do it, but it's a type of climb that I would not be able to do right away, and I would need to spend tons of time and pick the perfect day and the perfect conditions and the perfect body shape and the feeling for me, and then maybe I would do it. And that's only the V12. And for Carlo to actually put a grade of V16 on something, it's legit because he's done and sent and been in Yosemite for so long. He really is one of the people in the world that I would trust for grading something out there. And dude, that I remember in like 2016, I think, pretty early on in my climbing, I went on a trip. It was my first bouldering trip to Yosemite, and I didn't go on the trip with Ross and a couple of my other friends from the Bay, but Ross happened to be there the same day, and we went to go try the Forest and Thriller together, and we couldn't do either. And we looked over at there was chalk on this Dark Side project, and we were just like, well, some idiots are probably trying that thing, and that doesn't look possible. It doesn't look like a climb. And of course, many years later, Carlo does it. And dude, it's just, I think the most interesting thing about what you're saying is that these are test pieces. Midnight Lightning was a test piece. Dominator was a test piece, and this Dark Side project is a test piece. It's not necessarily that they're just cool hard climbs, they're test pieces. You know, they really bring out something in a climber in order to do them. And hopefully, you know, if you guys are listening, you guys are inspired to go try that stuff. It's all still rock. It's all still just climbing. It's possible, right? You guys should go try it. It's just so interesting for me, even just to pull on Dominator and just be like, wow, like this is rock climbing, man. Like this is super super hard, and I got to figure it out. That's the coolest part, man. It's so cool.
Yeah, God, when you look at that climb, the dark side, which by the way, good name. So it's a low start into the force, basically. That really makes it sound not as cool as it is because it's a totally different line. And I love when people name stuff after the project name. Like it's been called the Dark Side Project forever, and there's something about when climbs get these names around them and then they stick that I think is cool. And so it just, I don't know, props to Carlo for not feeling like he had to imprint his name on. I think I remember talking to Jared about Rostaman Vibration Sit, and then he was kind of bummed that it got renamed Lucid Dreaming. And there's something to be said for just letting the rock be itself and not feeling like you have to put your imprint on. Because honestly, again, it's going to go down in history as like that is a Yosemite achievement. And if you look at these holds, they're not holds, man. It's just a
Yeah,
slopey rail, and the
so
feet
slopey.
are so bad, Tim. There's
Yeah.
not feet. There's Yosemite feet, which are like this is a foot. Why is it a foot? Oh, I mean, I pointed at it, so we're going to use it, and then somehow you put all
Yeah.
your weight on it. So
I like also what you were saying about the stylistic differences. You know, like Dominator was a really big stamp in that era, and you know, Midnight Lightning was also a stamp in that era, and this is a huge stamp in this era. You know, the technical kind of body position, friction dependent, slopey style is, I would say, modern. You know, I would say it's almost comp style. Like it's so cool to see that. You know, that's what I really think comp style is. Is just it's hard. It's hard to figure out what you're supposed to do with holds and positions, and you know, it's a type of climb that I not sure if it would be done the same way, even if somebody else did it ever.
it's interesting. I was looking at Carlo's resume, and I was having a little chatter on some other text message threads. It's is Carlo the best all arounder in in climbing? And what I think is interesting is that I know he was trying this project years ago, and Jimmy was as well. And then Carlo, in that time, went and did. I gotta ask him this, but I'm pretty sure he tried that project. And then since then, he has done Meltdown and Magic Line, which are very techy 14 plus or 14 or 14 plus trad lines. And it's interesting that he then did this. It's this thing where it shows you how being an all around climber can lead to success in other areas. It's like you want to do V16 in Yosemite, maybe you should do this 14C trad line. Like that doesn't sound right, but hopefully we'll get him on to talk about this. I know he has. I don't know if this is public, so I'll keep it vague. But I know he has something very big happening in the next month or so that's going to keep him really busy. So may not be able to get him on soon, but hopefully we can get him on to just give us that blow by blow because I think he will be just as psyched to share that experience as we are to be talking about it secondhand.
Totally. Congrats, Carlo. We're psyched for you.
Yeah, congrats, man. Well, on the crushing note, crazy that Sean Bailey just went and cruised Lucid and Spectre and probably other things since we've recorded this pod. He's probably done other climbs since we're talking now. But the reason why I wanted to point it out is that I watched him do Lucid and it just makes the holes look like jugs. And it's something that I think is different about Sean compared to other climbers is he has this kind of chill, relaxed, almost loose looking style where I wouldn't say that he's sitting there crushing the holds. Like I would never, I mean, I'd call him a crusher, but I wouldn't say that what he looks like when he's climbing is crushing. He looks very loose and limp and almost like that kind of little kid style where they're kind of just like swinging around and everything looks like a jug to them. And I guess the reason why I'm bringing it up, other than just like, good freaking job, Sean, and that was cool watching it. Like, what do you see something similar, Tim? Like, do you see his style as being different from, I don't know, Carlos?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think this is an interesting thing in climbing it as a whole. It's something that I was talking about recently with like family, and it's not, you know, they're not climbers, and we're kind of talking about why climbing is not so popular and not so interesting to watch. And it's because, in my opinion, as climbing gets harder and harder and climbers get better and better, not just stronger, but better, climbing looks easier. Like, in my opinion, climbing looks easier if you're stronger and better. Sean is, I've climbed a fair amount with Sean in Salt Lake and, in training sessions and on the same climbs that I'll climb. And we don't climb the same way, for sure. And I think also in that, I mean, in his era, Sean has the strongest hands I think I've ever seen. His hands are so strong, and I think that his understanding of creation of movement and creation of momentum. I mean, he's a shorter guy, and so he needs to do those things, right? But then also his love and I think his appreciation for style and for just being loose on the wall. I think all those kind of culminate to this Sean Bailey style, which is his hands are freakishly strong. So when he grabs a hold that's bad, it probably isn't that bad for him. And then if he wants to go from point A to point B, he knows how to do it properly. And then he wants to look casual and chill on the wall, or at least he appreciates it. And so he's got this steez, which is,
Mm.
people call him steezy, and like I think all of that amounts to watching him on something like Lucid, where historically you'd watch. And also I was pleasantly surprised to hear him say that it took him 5 sessions, which was like, dude, it looked like he could have done it in a single session. Like, just based on how he did it, it looked, I mean, I think that might be one of the fastest ascents of Lucid,
I thought he
even as
said
it
three
stands.
session, or maybe it was third try that day. I could be mixing that
Yeah,
up.
I
It
read a
was not,
comment that said
yeah, not a
he said
lot
five
of. Oh,
sessions.
okay, yeah, yeah, not a
That's not
lot
a
of
lot of
sessions.
sessions, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I think Jimmy and Alex Magos had like the shortest sessions, and
Mm.
even Alex Magos, I think he said 7 sessions, and that's the longest he's ever spent on a climb. Lucid is a test piece of all time, and just to see, I think I wrote a comment also that I was waiting to see when Sean would go out to Bishop, because I think that Bishop is a very demanding place of finger strength and knowledge of movement, and he's one of the best I think ever in that way. And so I was pleasantly surprised to watch him, and I'm excited to see him on
Well,
other things. And
and also you said because I thought this is where you were going to go with the
mm,
pleasantly surprised was his grading comment, which I thought was kind of interesting.
that was also pleasantly surprising for me too. I mean, he said that it was one of the hardest of the grade, and maybe one of the hardest for him. And I totally had that speculation. I thought Lucid was prematurely downgraded, and I think it's still V16 relative to
Who
any other
downgraded it
V15 in the world. Paul Robinson himself downgraded it.
after
I
doing
think
it?
right after he did it. Yeah,
Huh.
I think he did it, then Daniel did it, and then I think it got downgraded. It's loose facts.
Dude,
But then also on Spectre, so he does the same thing on Spectre, man. Like, just flying around on these holds is insane. It is insane. Especially being the
why
size
did
that
he
he is.
do? Why did he cut feet on that move like the first rail? Not even like the crux move.
Oh,
I couldn't believe he cut feet on that.
the holds are jugs, so maybe he was just having
I
fun.
don't know if they're jugs, man. Like it's not. Yeah, I guess for me, it's not that the first move is hard, but like I like really be able to find that hand on that rail that you're then doing
Yeah.
the big move off of. So I like doing that really controlled and good. I don't know.
Well, I actually wonder if it was too tipped. Like, I wonder
Mm,
if he was
yeah,
just
yeah,
actually too short. Because for me, it's actually still a decently far move. Like, the right arm extends a bit,
yeah.
and so if the right arm extends and the left foot's too far away from you, which there's 2 foot options, and they're both decently far away. So I imagine it's actually was so that he can hit the hold optimally, which is slightly engaged, and that helps you get the feet up. Right, like it's actually pretty difficult. I would call it like V7 or so, just to like match that
Mm,
rail,
yeah.
right? To like stick the move, get your foot on, cam the foot in, whatever heel hook toe way you do, and then match it is like pretty hard. So
I
you need to do
also
it
well, I
properly.
also sometimes forget. Like for me, Spectre is really hard for me, and I just sometimes forget how not that he's not trying hard, but really when you are of that caliber, you don't you have some wiggle room there. You can kind of like I mean, he doesn't need to like micro it. He's just like, I'm just gonna grab. I mean, dude, Sean Rabbit freaking flashed it. So yeah, anyways, okay. Yeah, dude, I just congrats to Sean Bailey and Sean Rabbit for flashing that. But man, the way he grabbed that pinch on Lucid just blew my mind. And I was saying this to you before. I just would watch. I watch these videos of him. I go, oh, I'll just go and do that climb then. Like it's not that bad. Like look at how he's grabbing that. Look at the way he's able, not just able to generate movement, but you can tell, like, there's sometimes when you see people generate movement, you can tell that the hold is shit and they're just
Mhm.
like really doing everything they can to get weight on that foot and jump, and they're kind of jumping around it. Honestly, man, it looked like he pulled right through it. He just grabbed it and
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
yarded on. I mean,
Dude.
these are all varying degrees. It's not like he's actually just yarding on this shitty pinch, but
Yeah, yeah.
just compared to others, I was really impressed with how
No,
he
I
handled
love
that.
what you're saying. Relative to other people, he did not have to do the move as perfectly as possible because he was strong enough to pull through the movement. I watched that video in a row like 10 times. And I was like, holy cow, dude. Like, I'm watching this thing. It's actually, for me, it's not how he pulls on the pinch, which is very impressive. Most people cannot even bend their arm on that pinch. They have to keep their arm straight, get their body completely square to the wall, and then jump perfectly to land at the perfect height so you don't swing and you don't want to pull into the holds. That crimp that you jump into is completely blocked, right? And to watch him just stick it and then just pull in like that, I was like, oh, dude, your hands have to be so strong for that to happen. That was one of the most mind blowing ascents I've watched. It's so sick, dude. Like when you really know what those holds feel like too. If you're listening to this and you know what lucid dreaming is, man, when I've been to Bishop at pretty much every single year since I've climbed, and every single year, the tradition is you pull up straight to the Grandpa Peabody. It's the first boulder. You walk up to Lucid Dreaming, you stack pads, and you grab that pinch, and you see if you've gotten stronger, and you just don't get stronger. And the hole does not get better. And just to see him just climb it like that with that style is just insane. And also, being shorter for him, dude, he has to like jump into the pinch. Like from the undercling, he has to like stand up hell fast to jump into the pinch. And oh, dude, it's crazy, man.
That's crazy
Super
because
strong.
when I look at that move, I think of just really locking off that shark tooth and just really
Same.
being strong and holding that by your chest and reaching up and finding that
That's
how
how I
you
do it.
want, which is crazy. Tim, I just have this image of you hopping out of the car. You got a jelly donut, you got powdered sugar all over you, and you stack your shitty Metolius pads and grab the pinch and just make it all greasy for everyone else.
Oh yeah.
Little did anyone know that 10 years later, Tim would be vying for a real cent on it. Anyways, that's actually one of the problems with these famous iconic climbs that are low balls where you can, I mean, dude, I can't believe it's
Mm.
called lucid a low ball, but where you can grab all the holds. Like if you look at Midnight Lightning, those first holds are so polished, and honestly, the granite in Yosemite does not get polished that easy. Like that really
Yeah.
shows how many people have fondled it. So yeah, I can't believe I called lucid dreaming a low ball, even though it kind of is. But there's some cool shots that he posted. Actually, my friend Sarah took one of them on Instagram, and it shows him
I saw
topping
that.
out. I just love how big that freaking boulder is. You're just,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, I don't know how tall it literally is, but it's like 60 feet or 70 feet tall, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
50, 55, I think.
looks like a freaking house. It's bigger than a house. It looks way bigger than a house. Damn.
Yeah. I mean, it's taller than most sport climbs. For perspective for all of you, it's taller than most sport climbs in any gym. Any gym in the US, it's taller than most sport climbs in any gym. Yeah, which is crazy. When you put it in that perspective, you look up in the gym and you're like, oh, this is pretty tall. I would not free solo that. And you're like, oh, people are regularly doing that in Bishop.
Mm, mm. Bishop. It's a sick joke, or at least on in America, where the best season for climbing hard is the winter season. You do not go at Bishop in June. You need to go there in basically late December, sometimes November, all the way through March if you're lucky. Sometimes April, cold snap, and you have this whole lead up to your winter break trip where everyone's going out to crush, and it's just full of cookies and eggnog, and it's just, what is this? Why did climbing have to work out like this when you get this 2 week break from your life to go out and crush, and the month leading up to is just encouraged debauchery of the kind that does not make for good climbing. I wish, I don't know, makes me angry, Tim, makes me angry. I've been eating my cookies and drinking my eggnog and not going to Bishop, so
Me too.
yeah, yeah. I don't have as good an excuse as you do, but all right, Tim. That I'm so glad we got to. I'm just glad that those sends happened and we got to talk about them. And I remember thinking back to when there was maybe a little less climbing media out there, and something like lucid dreaming had gone up. I would literally be refreshing 8a.new to see if anyone sent, like, you look at that sidebar and you're like, oh, I wonder if anyone's going to repeat lucid dreaming this year, like it. And I know that buddies or certain climbers were out there and you'd be waiting for that stuff to happen. And now with Instagram being so prevalent, it's just I don't know, man. When I saw Carlo do the dark, when I saw that post get made, I literally was like, oh shit, like, yeah, I'm you know, my mom and wife are like, what? I'm like, you don't care. It's some pebble wrestler climbing up something with really bad holds instead of just walking up the back. Way easier.
That's pretty funny. Dude, one thing I was thinking about is I would really be curious to see Aiden Roberts and Will Bosey try lucid dreaming, or honestly most stuff in Bishop. It just they're so, that I can say
They'll
this
do it,
because
Tim.
I've climbed. For
I
sure
think
they'll
they'll do
do
it.
it,
Yeah.
but I mean Sean, I would have said with almost 100% certainty that he would do lucid dreaming. But what was interesting for me was to watch it, right? To see at what style, how easily did he do it. And those are the types of people also that I think would vie for that strongest hands of this generation. And so I would be really interested to see that. So
Mm.
calling them out.
Did you see that Simon Lorenzi did the Lapnor, or sorry, did Burden of Dreams?
Alphane.
He did
Oh,
Bird of Dreams just now. I
seriously?
didn't look too much. I just Eric Jerome,
Holy
previous
cow.
podcast guest, had reposted that post, and I just right before I hopped on, I saw that. So
Whoa, I didn't see
yeah.
that. That's
So
super impressive.
you know what's funny is, all right, we're just still going these tangents. So this whole like V17 grade, we had talked on again on like a text message thread with some people, like, what is is dark side V17, or does V17 exist? Because Carlo had made some comments on the podcast we did with him about that grade 9A
Mm,
V17, and he kind of said perhaps Burden of Dreams is actually V17, and now we're seeing it kind of get done, and it makes me wonder, like, I don't know. We got to talk to Carlo again because there's been a lot of sends of Burden of Dreams since then. I think since then, Megatron has come out with, Drew Ruanda doing that. Return of the Sleepwalker is still kind of sitting there. It's just, I don't know. I'd be curious to hear if Carlo has changed his opinion. And, when you see V17 get done quickly, like, like it goes up and then it gets repeated a few times. I don't know what to think about that. I really don't. I mean, I'm way
yeah.
over my ski tips here, but I'd be curious to talk to people who have climbed multiple V16s and
Yeah.
maybe tried those climbs, see what they think.
It's a good point. I think one thing to consider that's something I've been thinking about quite a bit is not a lot of comp climbers even try to climb outside. And I would say the current meta of comp climbers are a lot stronger than the previous meta of comp climbers. And so if you would maybe set, Toby Roberts and Serato and, Yoshiyuki on a bunch of rock for, even just a little bit of time. Granted, that rock is hard to, adapt to. You give them enough time to adapt to rock climbing, I think they would crush. I think they would be sending B17. So,
Hmm.
I think, even thinking about climbers who are successful in competitions like, before, like Gabby Maroney and like Alex Kazanov were like super strong rock climbers, but also successful in competition, but they're strong rock climbers and you knew that. But then what about these climbers who are beating them in the comps, clearly super strong, but like really never rock climb? How strong would they be on rock? I think that's where we'd be more interested is like, okay, Burden didn't really get repeated for a long time after Nolly did it. Nolly took a ton of time. Nolly was one of the best boulders of all time, and then it just didn't get repeats. But not getting repeats isn't necessarily just the thing that we should be looking at to see if something's really hard. We should be seeing like all these good climbers and then testing them on it. So, for that matter, I would like to see people like Sean and Toby and them try something like Burden as well, and then get that opinion. That'd be sick.
I was texting with Jared Roth, the the first ascent of Rastaman Vibration, which has that lucid crux move on it, and also the owner of Pusher, so the reason why I was texting with him is because he's kind of the guy who runs that Pusher crew of Sean Bailey, Zach Galla, and Nathaniel Coleman, and others. But kind of those are, the iconic three. And yeah, God, I don't think I think I'm allowed to share this. He said in some ways he was glad that that Zach and Sean didn't make it to the Olympics this year because they got, second, third on at the Pan Ams, because he knew that they were going to go and just
Mm.
absolutely crush outside. And you can listen to the pod we did with Zach to hear more about that, kind of thinking about that balance. But there is a side to me that I mean, this is a forever discussion where I was like, I love comp climbing, but there is something about like that permanence of seeing them do
dude.
Watching that video of Sean doing lucid dreaming is somehow like I will watch that and that will go down, when that goes up on Mellow or wherever, it will be watched many, many times and people will go back. And for years, people are going to think like, oh, I'm built more like Sean. Maybe this is how I'm going to do it. Where if Sean, gets into finals in the Olympics, like it's a fleeting moment. I'm not saying the Olympics aren't freaking cool. I said if I'm getting that neck tat of the Olympics, if I ever make it, but there's something that there's less permanence there, and so yeah, I kind of echo what Jared is saying. I still would love to see those guys be able to showcase what they do on stage and that kind of crowd style of the Olympics, but I'm also kind of psyched to see what's going to come out of there, what's going to show up on their tick list in the next couple of years.
Dude, totally. Yeah, I've had a lot of the same thoughts about, you know, me as well. I mean, I stepped away from comps specifically to spend some time on rock because of that whole permanence factor of what the outdoors offers. But honestly, a lot of me has felt like comp climbing is missing something, and kind of reflecting on it, it's like maybe that's the type of thing we should lean into that. Well, comp climbing isn't even that interesting, I would argue, for a lot of climbers to watch. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people listening to this might agree. It's not as interesting as watching stuff like outdoor rock climbing, but that's not necessarily because of you know anything to it could be with what you're saying, but it also could just be because we're not that interested in how they're battling. Like the battles are for me really fun. Like watching Legends Only growing up, watching some Adidas Rockstars moments, like some World Cups back in the day, nationals. Like let's face it, comps were interesting, right? And nowadays they're not really as interesting. So they're clearly missing something.
Well, Tim, I've said this before. There's definitely some murmurs about potentially competing, uh, a competition circuit that competes with USAC or IFSC. There may be something coming down the pipe. I don't have a ton of details, but I don't think I I think it's pretty widely known now that a lot of the climbers aren't excited with the current state of competitions, and a lot of the spectators aren't excited with the current state of competitions. And whenever you have that happen, hopefully someone comes up and can fill that void. Because we talked about this with Zach. Like, it's not that it's not that the way World Cups are bad right now. It's just they're a certain type of climbing, and they test a certain thing, and they're interesting in their own way to a certain segment of people. But that climbing is so freaking varied. There's so much
Mhm.
amazing stuff that happens in climbing, and yeah, Tim, we can't go down this rabbit hole anymore. We will actually we will go down this rabbit hole more, but we will save it for other podcasts because this is a topic that
Yes.
yeah is infinite. So all right, Tim, let's do a few announcements just to keep the structure going. Uh, it's the new year, and if you are listening to this and you like geeking out about climbing with me and Tim, which I'm sure you do if you're listening to this one, join us on our classroom or office hours. So you got to be part of Patreon to do that. It's the classroom tier, and you can join us each month. Ask us at least one question. We always answer everyone's question if they just have one. It can be directly about your climbing, super specific. All of that's great. But you also get access to all of our past classrooms, which I don't know. Do we have like 12 plus hours of just total in-depth climbing content, really focused on getting better, less chatter about the latest and the greatest and more about what people like us need to do to get better. So yeah, join us. We're having a blast with that, and we'd love to have more people in there. So good New Year's resolutions to join us on that. And if you just want to support us in general, we always have the lower tier. And 2023 went so well for the podcast, so we're just going to double down on everything in 2024. And your support is directly tied to us being able to get better and more content. And we have a lot of low hanging fruit things we want to do, but it's just tough without help. And so that money really goes towards paying other climbers to help us produce more content. And so any support is appreciated. And thanks for all the support in 2023, and just let's make 2024 even better. So happy New Year. The new year, like we said, is a great time to just reflect, decide what we want to do, decide, course correct. We have these moments to take a step back and see the stars and decide where we're heading, why we're heading there, what it means to us. And so that's really what our segment is about today. That's kind of like the deeper thinking we all do around this time frame. But the way we got into this discussion, me and Tim, is that he was saying that he had a client and he was like wondering why some of his sessions weren't so great. I mean, we've all had that. You go into the gym, you're just not that psyched. I mean, we were just talking about that earlier. Oh man, I just ate like 20 Christmas cookies. I don't really want to climb. I just want to lay on the couch and play with my new iPad that I got for Christmas. And instead, you try to go in and have a good session. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And I liked, Tim, how you turned it around. You said, why can't every session be great? And so that's kind of where our conversation started with this meta topic. And so maybe you can start it there, Tim, and that kind of conversation you had with one of your clients. And I think it's a good way to begin this topic.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this idea of having a fuel in your session, like a mental fuel in your session for a really long time. I obviously I'm passionate about it because in my personal sessions, I credit it as the number one thing as to what, my growth and my success was the mental fuel. It's not I've got a lot of ideas for training, man. I can write training plan after training plan after training plan. I used to write that stuff out like nobody's business. But that always changed. No matter what training plan I would write, it always changed. One thing that didn't change and one thing that I was always consistent with was my internal fire. Getting myself to do more, getting myself to stay longer, getting myself to try harder and believe in myself more. And so this youth client that I work with, um, shout out Will if you're listening. Hopefully you don't feel bad that we're using you as an example, but this context will help. This client of mine has struggled from the so in youth competitions you go from regionals to divisionals, and divisionals is 2 days, and then the second day your top six from each division. This has changed over the years, but right now the top six will qualify to nationals. And for kids, man, like for youth climbers, and I know this well, and for all of us, dude, like when we were competing in youth, that was the gold standard. You needed to make nationals. That's really what you wanted to do. It's where you started to even. That's when you started to matter for comps and stuff. It's not truly what it feels like, but for us, it really mattered a lot, and it matters a lot for me when the kids talk about it. And this guy struggled. He's always in that one spot, and he's a phenomenal rock climber. I love Will a bits, and he's so talented. But there's something that just gets in this way, I think, at divisionals. And he doesn't necessarily, we were talking a lot deeper than just, this topic, but this topic came out. And I kind of told him, I guess we were talking about the training from now until divisionals. And I said, well, how are you going to get the best at divisionals? Yeah, we can, because he kind of brought up, well, I would like to just get thrown in that moment right now. I'm excited. I would love to just be there right now. I'm like, yeah, great. That would be awesome. That would be awesome to have that experience right now, to see what you're made of. But what a what about looking at it from this way? You're going to have a bunch of training sessions from now until divisionals, and how would you then get the result that you want? What would we need to have during those times? And we started talking about the differences between, good training sessions and not so good training sessions. And we always talk about training and, how to optimize that training for, what your weakest links are and then what you need to have. But then, yeah, how to just basically take those training sessions to turn you into a climber that you need to be at a competition. And that's more of a specific thought for training. Training is I think for a lot of people a physical thing. Actually, for most people, it's probably a physical thing, right? And it is a physical thing. I'm not saying training isn't a physical thing, but if we only treat it as a physical thing, that's all we're gonna get, man. That's all we're gonna get. And so we need to see that having a deeper fueling from inside is maybe more important, because that's always what's going to show up no matter where you go. And I think that's just, it's a couple of, and Josh and I we keep talking about this, and I think we've always had this type of topic, underlying in our conversations. And I've really wanted a podcast on it, especially towards the end of the year, because, a blanket statement here is that uh, hunger can be found in your darkest moments, and that's what we wanted to talk about, right? In the darkest moments, and that's what we were talking about with Will. Is think about how you're going to feel after divisionals. Think about how you felt after divisionals in the past. Think about how you feel, and for those of you who are listening who maybe aren't in youth or competing in competitions, think about how you feel after a trip. Think about how you feel after a session on your project when you didn't send. Yeah, and even if you do send, I'm sure people aren't 100% happy with themselves. I'm sure people aren't 100% complete. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep climbing, right? Everyone's hungry. Everyone wants to keep doing more. But the hungriest moment is right after that failure. The hungriest moment is right after that failure. That's what you want to be thinking about. That's what you want to be thinking about for all of your sessions, and that's the importance of it.
Yeah, I had that written down from my last chat. You're the hungriest right after you fail. Can you channel that every day? And the thing, so it's interesting because I see it from both ends of the spectrum when you made that example with Will, where I don't know if you made this really explicit, but it sounded like Will was often one spot away from where he wanted to be. So it's that bubble. That's like the one of the toughest places to be because you're so close, but you didn't quite make it. And so I understand that hunger that drives. But then something he said that I think was also interesting is how he was excited. Like in that moment, he was like, "I want to just go right now." Like in the last session you had with him, where he was excited right there. And so what it made me think of also was, how do you have that same excitement on Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. when you've had a long day already? Just like, how can you have that same moment? And to me, it's those tying those two things together. You're hungry right now, like right after you fail, and you also want to get back there and prove yourself as soon as possible and see what you're made of. But the thing that often isn't recognized is that what happens that 6 months later is all just a culmination of what happens today, tomorrow. And so you need to somehow, not somehow, this is what we're talking about that fire and being hungry. You need to recognize that today, when you're sessioning, you need to bring that same intensity as you bring 6 months later in divisions. It's or when you're on your road trip. And yeah, I wanted to tie that into what we often talk about, or what I love from Dave McLeod, where it's less about the sets and reps that you're doing on the hangboard, less about the 4x4s versus 5x5s or whatever, and more about the intention that you're bringing right there to have that intensity. And it's just it's a good reminder because it's easy to let it slip, to be like, oh, that's in 6 months. Like, oh, I mean, if I don't train today, I'll train tomorrow. But having that sense of urgency and that fire every day, I mean, that's what everyone has who is great. That they're not saying, I'll put it off till tomorrow. I'm going to check in early today. And I think that there's a big there's a big push in not just but especially in climbing, where it's like, you need to rest more and you need to do all this more. And I get that. Like, I don't want people out there getting hurt, but just recognize that, like, you're not going to do your lifetime V16 project or win the Olympics by doing nothing. Like, those guys are showing up, those guys and girls are showing up and doing their absolute best every day they have the chance. And they have that sense of urgency. Even if it's a 10-year goal, they show up today like they're taking one step
Yeah.
towards that.
Yeah, and I think that the deeper layer underneath that is it's it, you can I think people train, right? Everybody trains, everybody has training plans, and and not everybody has training plans, but there are tons of people who train. There are tons of people who train and then don't amount to the progression that they want to see and don't amount to a result that they want to have. And in fact, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not even talking about the people who don't decide to train. I'm talking about the people who do train and then don't get what they want, right? I like what you're saying there with the Dave McLeod thing. You brought it up a couple of times, and yeah, the idea there is that the mentality behind the training is almost more important, if not just straight up more important, than what the training is that you were doing. The mentality behind the training is almost more important than the training itself that you were doing. It's so much more important. And I think one thing you're kind of poking at there, when it comes to the positive side of training and seeing the desire, is that's the most significant thing, right? Ideally, we want to have this fire and we're just psyched and we're like, yeah, well, this is where we want to be. This is what we want to do. And it's more interesting to look at when that doesn't happen. And so when people don't do that, and this is something that we also brought up in conversation, is what does it look like when you're not doing that, right? What does it look like when you're not hungry, you're not believing in yourself, you're not just like fully in desire? Well, you're insecure, you're critical, you're judgmental of yourself, right? And this is something that everybody has to reflect on. Don't worry, I do it all the time, man. I get into a warm up, I do my session, I do my hangboard, I do everything. I'm like, dude, you're so weak. Like, that feels so much harder than before. You're so behind this. Like, you can imagine what that does to your approach to doing that activity. It has nothing to do with you actually doing that activity well, right? You're just judging yourself. You're just insecure. You're just thinking about why you're not good enough, right? Well, do that before the gym. Do that at home. Do that somewhere else. Do that after your session, right? At the session itself, there's no room for insecurity. There's no room for judgment. There's no room for being critical. What we have to look at is, what do we want, right? And this is really where I want to get with this, is having specific goals, really being specific with your goals, really looking at, what is my end goal? What do I look like at the end of it? Whether it's a performance or whether it's just a state of being. Like, do I just want to be a strong warrior climber? No matter what challenge I have in front of me, I'm able to, look at it, digest it, and try my best, regardless if I succeed or fail, which I think is a great way to approach climbing. Or do you have this actual competition or this project or this challenge that you need to step up for? Well, you need to be really specific about how you're going to get that done. If you're not specific about how, if you're going to say, okay, I want to send this project. Okay, well, this project has these holds and these movements. Well, okay, then I need to do this hangboard plan because I need to have stronger fingers. That's not really being specific, right? You need to go and try your ass off, fail, and then say, okay, what did I lack? If you don't have your own assessment, if you don't have your own assessment of understanding what you're missing, you cannot be specific about how you're training for that type of thing. Therefore, you cannot be believing and have that hunger and have that desire in your sessions. For me, it was really important to be young and compete. When I was young and competing, I would go and I would inevitably fail. I would not, who does really really well right away. Probably just the one kid that, and they always struggle in the end too. Every kid that I've seen who succeeds early will struggle later. So it's not even that they're just good. They're just good for the rest of their lives. They're gonna run into their speed bumps. Everyone runs into their speed bumps. So hopefully, I have this hope for all the kids that I coach. You run into speed bumps early. You run these speed bumps early, so you actually shape how you're supposed to train, how you're supposed to find your goals, how you're supposed to understand what failure, quote unquote failure, is actually supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like. These all tie hand in hand into fueling your sessions, right? At least for me, it did.
Dude, that was so interesting what you said about finding your speed bumps early. Also, I love this thing that we all will struggle at some point. And there's this great book, I think it's called Mastery, where it basically showed that if you were an early phenom, you had success when you were young, they actually didn't dictate your success reliably later, because any kind of mastery takes just lots of effort over time. Sometimes, though, it helped because it set them down the path. They saw success, and so they were excited and came back. But then they always ended up in some pond. They're always left the small pond where they were the big fish and moved to a bigger one and got their ass kicked at some point. And I think what's interesting about that idea is that there's this quote. Okay, I'm not going to say a quote. There's this story I remember hearing from Charlie Munger, who's a famous investor who just passed away, actually. He's a Warren Buffett's partner, so
Mm.
smart guy. And he said that one of the worst things that can happen to people is that they get rewarded for the wrong thing when they're young.
Mm.
And so this was more in the context of investing, but you can imagine, let's say you're an investor. And so you pick a stock by doing a dance and then throwing a dart at the paper and picking a stock. And let's say that stock went up 100x. And you're like, oh, I figured it out. I just need to do a dance and then throw a dart at the board. And clearly that's not the way to be Warren Buffett. And so I like the thing you're saying there, where if you hit issues early and then you figure out how to resolve them in that meta way, not just that specific issue, but that you understand deeply how to progress, you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of progression, because you're going to hit speed bumps. It's the one thing I know is life is going to throw you a curveball. Have you ever had a curveball thrown at you? Have you ever gotten injured? Yeah.
Have I ever gotten a straight ball? That's how I see it. I've ever gotten an easy straight ball that's handed to me? No. It's so important. Yeah, I like how we're having this conversation about failure and accepting, the deep layers of failure. And there's something there with winning and losing and failure and your perception of it that has to do with your fuel for training, man. Like, that's what I'm trying to get at is it, and kids are the most interesting, right? Because you're right, dude. Like, especially for me, when I get kid clients, I have to take many, many sessions and many situations and many scenarios. It took me about a year. I work with 3 youth clients right now. It took me about a year straight of working with them. It's been about a year since I've worked with them a little more. It took about a year to actually understand how they digest winning and losing. And that for me is really the core of how I coach these people, right? Because if I can give them a stronger fire inside, a stronger engine, right? A stronger way of digesting, if a stronger system, they're going to be fine. Right. I don't care about necessarily the technique. Everybody's got, I don't even know climbing, man. Like climbing is still being figured out left and right. Who knows what the best actual way is? I'm trying to figure that out personally, but I'm not going to tell somebody exactly what the best way is. I'll give them likelihoods, like likely this is optimal and likely you would do this. But honestly, with kids, that's why I like coaching them is that they're smart, man. Like kids could be way smarter than me as long as they had the right systems. And I have gone through so many things in my climbing career just so I could teach them these things, right? And I think that's how a lot of coaches see it. And so looking through their failures, how they digest them and what they say, and I say, well, that's why you're lacking in this training session. That's because that's how you look at it, right? And you call them out. And I've had the hardest conversations I've ever had with my kid athletes, and I'll know that they are growing with it because they stay with me, right? It's okay. I don't mind hurting people's feelings because they're hurt anyway. I don't mind hurting people's feelings about their failures or successes because they're already hurt. If they're not exactly where they want to be, they're hurt, right? And so with kids, I don't mind hurting them because they're already hurt and they're extremely frustrated and emotional about their experiences, their successes and failures. And so I might as well guide it. I might as well say, well, you see this pain that you're going through. It's actually these things. It's not that you're not good enough. It's not that you didn't win. It's not these types of things. It's not, what are you talking about? No, it just means that you need to work on these things, right? And so if we direct all our emotion and our frustration, and that's what I think a lot of coaches have said this. You've heard, everyone's heard this type of thing, like use your emotion, direct it. It's like, what does that mean, man? Like, okay, you sucked. That's fine. You sucked. That's totally fine, right? It's okay. Like you sucked though. If we can't say that about ourselves, first of all, if we not even if you're a youth, climber who's in competitions, if you can't say that to yourself, you're not really going to get much of a learning experience. If you can't say, okay, I tried really hard, I sucked, and that's all right, but how did I suck? Why did I suck? What is it that I need to do that will prevent me from sucking the next time? And don't get it twisted, man. You doing that and figuring that out does not mean you're not going to suck the next time. You're just going to suck a little bit less, hopefully. Or you might suck way more. Who knows? And you're going to have to say again. Maybe it's something different, but you're going to have to say this again. I sucked again. And then how do I keep moving forward?
I just love that because I always think if you're not willing to suck or look like a fool, you're not willing to get better because
Totally.
it just goes hand in hand. And I first of all, I just want to point out that I like your style of coaching there, where it's more that teach someone to fish versus give them a fish. And I remember Will Englund saying that too on the pod, where he said, "I want to coach you as little as possible,"
Mm-hmm.
because you know I mean, we do get into techniques and tactics and movement theory and really that stuff that is actionable in that moment, but every body is different, every move is different, and climbing evolves. And so, yes, we always need to focus on fundamentals, but when you're really talking about progressing in that mastery, you're going to have to blaze a trail yourself a little bit. And to tie all this into that literal physicality of what a training session is like and how to have that fire and that hunger and channel it into that moment, I often think about Arnold Schwarzenegger's book. He wrote this autobiography called Total Recall. And there's this famous part in it where he literally said that when he was doing push-ups, that he enjoyed the pump or the pain, the tiredness, because he linked that to winning Mr. Olympia. So it wasn't that, oh, this is something I have to go through. It's like, oh, wow, every effort gets me one step closer to my goals. But I think what is really the nuance there that you were bringing out is that you have to be very specific about your goals. You have to understand your goals, and then you have to be objective and make sure that the training you're doing is directly correlated to what your goal is, so that that effort that you're putting out feels, you're psyched because you're like, this is getting me where I need to go. Yes, it's hard, but it doesn't feel hard in the way that you're suffering through it. It's hard in the way that you are making the hard step forward. You're like, yes, this is hard, but it's the
Totally.
right step. And that's an important connection.
Totally. Yeah, I think these ideas aren't necessarily exclusive to climbing. They're definitely not. They're far more talked about and studied in plenty of other sports. I think climbing, we like to think that it's a total flow technical sport, but when we're training it in practice for the great ones, for great climbers, people are in the gym as savages. We're animals. We're warriors in the gym, right? We're just going. I have that Arnold Schwarzenegger mentality all the time. For me, push-ups is about getting myself to just feel absolute fire in my body, the most pain and the most discomfort for as long as possible. And if I don't feel that, the reps don't matter. It just doing push-ups for numbers don't matter, right? Like everyone needs to hear this. Doing push-ups for numbers does not matter. It just matters to get your body to feel that pump and feel that fire and just feel that and pushing yourself through discomfort. That's the point of working out. Really think about it. That's the point of working out, is to get yourself through that discomfort, through destruction of your muscles so that they can rebuild to be stronger after that, right? And training should be approached that way. Climbing itself, now we think about climbing. That's why I think a lot of our podcasts are kind of the way that they are, right? We talk about the deep understandings of climbing, the importance of sequencing, the importance of the mental biases for like, oh, but you don't want to have that language. That's why this stuff is significant, man. Because at the end of the day, if you don't understand exactly what you're doing, then the fuel doesn't really matter. But just because you understand what you're doing and you don't have fuel, you're not going to get the most out of your sessions, right? If you really want to have the most out of your sessions, if you really want to go from good to great, you need to have this perfect balance, this perfect concoction of strong fuel, but a deep understanding of what you're doing, and then an ability to analyze and try really hard to do what you're doing, right? That's how you grow. If you really want to grow, you need to know how to grow, man. You need to understand your sport. You need to try hard every time. You need to be smart and think about it every time. And then you need to think about your internal flame. And is that being fed? Is that okay? Or are you insecure? Are you judging your sessions? Because if you don't have one of these steps, you're definitely not going to grow at the end of it. I mean, you might see gains, but if you want to grow every year, this is what you need to have, right? And so I think another thing about this, and actually, my pro tip will land perfectly here. My pro tip is practice self-assessing in your warm-ups. Climbing demands some incredibly important technical and physical factors. So you should regularly check your footwork, grip strengths, all varieties of grip strengths, pulling and core strengths. This can help when creating training plans, but it's also great for mental reminders when selecting climbs throughout the day. Be cognizant of the intensity of styles based on your weaknesses and strengths. I think the big thing there, and Josh will probably realize that he does this intuitively. Just as every warm up that he does, he's just like, oh, okay, that feels a little bit, okay, all right, this feels okay, this is exact, okay, all right, got. Right? He doesn't really do much about that, but it's helpful to have that mental reminder, right? And then you actually know yourself a little bit better.
Something I want to kind of go back to that you said, because I really enjoyed that segment that you just did there. I think that connecting those things is really crucial, and how this is that nuance we always try to bring is it's not just the mental and it's not just the technical, like it's always this connection of everything. And when you're talking about going deep on sets and or going deep on reps and not necessarily worrying about the number but that mental aspect. And so I I've said this before, but I think it's always worth repeating, where when you are training something or getting better at something, the mental aspect is being trained also in the way that it allows you to try even harder and go even deeper. So when you tear down those muscles and they build back up, yes, the one push up might feel easier, but when you're able to then go from 10 push ups to 15, you still have to be able to stretch your mind to those 15 push ups. And there's some, I can't remember, I think he was a runner. He was a guy like Prefontaine who did like the 4 minute mile or something. I could be getting this wrong. It doesn't matter. It was that his point was is that you get stronger and then it allows you to just go even deeper into your try hard. Like, so it never gets easy. Like when you, it might get easier for you to climb V8 when you can climb V15, but going from V15 to V16 is actually even harder mentally than going from V8 to V9. It's not just that your muscles got stronger and now you can do something better. Your newfound strength allows you to have newfound mental depth, mental strength. I'm not sure what the word would be there, but those people who are doing those really hard grades, especially for them, are actually digging deeper than you are, and they're physically stronger. It's not one or the other. They're linked in step. You have to get stronger and go deeper into your effort ability. I think that's an underrating part of training, and underrated understanding of what it's like to do something at a high level. It's not easy. It's harder. They are going harder than you are on your V4. Just
Yeah.
period.
Dude, climbing is so complex, man. Like something that I've realized in my climbing. So I think about that so much. I'm just like, wow, all the things I get to do now that I'm stronger and better and smarter. But then how much more do I have to try, right? Once I'm like, dude, I one time I think this was 2018 or 2017. We had a pull up competition, and I'm not a pull up world record holder, but for me this is impressive. It was the end of team practice, and one of the team kids, Gwenny, who just loves to ask questions and just go crazy on the questions. She asked one of the team kids who was older. I think he was only like a year or two younger than me, and he's super strong. Like could we watch him just like do one arm pull ups and just hang out and stuff. But I was really strong too. But it's not like the kids saw me climb like during practice. I never put my shoes on during practice. I never pulled them to the wall. And I made a really specific effort not to do that. I really don't think that that's helpful for all forms of coaching. But at the end of practice, Gwenny said, "Who can do more pull-ups, Joe or Tim?" And I was like, I didn't say anything, and Joe was like 100% Tim. And I was like, actually, I don't know that. I was like, I'm pretty sure we'd be pretty close. And she's like, let's go do a pull-up contest. And I was like, oh my god, dude, like, okay, all right, let's go do this. And I was like, Joe, how many pull-ups do you think you could do? And he's like, oh no, like 20. And I was like, you could do 40, like for sure you could do 40. He's like, dude, what? No, I've never done. And so we were just going back and forth. And I was like, all right, well, if you do 40 pull-ups right now, dude, I'll give you $20. He's like, seriously? He does 40 pull-ups. I give him $20. There's this girl. There's this 15-year-old Indian chick named Chitra, and she's always so quiet. And I knew she was a crusher, but maybe not the best technical ability in climbing, but she was insanely strong. And somebody from the side, just after Joe, and we're outside after team practice, everyone's psyched and it's like, oh, Joe did 40. It's like, oh, so sick. Someone from the side goes, Chitra's done 50. I was like, what? Like, what? Dude, if you do 50 pull-ups right now, I'll give you $20. She does 50 pull-ups on the bar, and I give her $20. And then we're just making a fuss, and they're like, "Oh, how many do you think you can do?" I was like, "Well, if I do 60 pull-ups right now, how about I get my money back?" And I get on the bar. It takes me 20 minutes, and I do 60 pull-ups, and that's the most pull-ups I've ever done. And I was like, after that, it just gave me this insane benchmark for the standard for when I usually tell myself I can't do things when I usually and man, it just opened my eyes up to the numbers and like the feeling of going for it, and just like reassessing my standard for like when I tell myself to stop. Like why don't I always do that? Why don't I always go for that? And then I was like, wow, like how hard must it be for me to get 100% out of every session? How tired would I be mentally? How exhausted would I be, right? But that's what it takes. I wanted to tie that into the complexity of training. For me, it's incredibly important to still do regular push-ups, regular pull-ups, and a regular plank. It's something that I've done for my entire climbing life, and it's something that I will always do for the rest of my life, because that's where the complexity is low. In climbing, you can't really do that, right? Now, in climbing, you can get really good, and this is kind of what Josh was talking about. As you get more skilled, or actually, this is the other side of what Josh is talking about, because this is what Josh is talking about. But the other side of what Josh is talking about is as you get skilled and your abilities grow, then you can finally get that out of your climbing because you're finally better. And now it's just about the physical. Now it's just about the physical and climbing. But very, very few people can get that. And I don't even think basically what I'm saying is I can't get nearly as much from me on the wall as I can in a push-up position. In a push-up position, on the bar, on the floor, I can get way more out of myself physically and mentally than I can on the climbing wall, because my technical abilities are still the limiting factor there, right? Now, once your technical abilities are high enough, of course, you can get that out of your climbing sessions, but that's just some food for thought, right? Like, I need both. But when I'm training, I need both. Just getting myself physically strong in climbing and technically strong in climbing and mentally strong in climbing isn't enough, because I definitely cannot get into that 60 pull-up bar range. I mean, I did 30 pull-ups in a row straight during that. I didn't even stop. I was just like boom, 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 full range of motion, 30 pull-ups. And then I stopped at 30 and I was like, I'd take breaths. I did 5. I took breaths. I did 5. And then every single one from 40 was one pull-up at a time. I was allowed to, hang and shake out, but like not, not do anything else. I would just do one pull up, just like, oh my God, like, but I never got off the bar. And just, again, that cannot really be found in climbing. But that's the type of thing that we want to be stretching our brains for, our minds for, right? And that's why I see climbing as incredibly complex. Because if you don't train like that, you'll probably never even tap remotely close on the climbing wall, right? If you don't know what that feels like and you don't know actually how to find for that stuff, right? And that's kind of, again, all it just all ties hand in hand with this training mentality. I feel very deeply that climbing, growth in climbing, true progression in climbing is far more complex than most people make it to be. And if we think that following a training plan, we think that just doing the motions, we think that no matter who writes your training plan, I don't care, no matter how good the training plan is and how proven it is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as much as the mentality behind the training.
That's why so many people climb for so many years at the same grade.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they lie to you or lie to themselves and saying that they don't want to climb any harder, that they're just there for fun. And that's fine. I'm sure that there are some people out there who are just doing it for fun, although they're probably not listening to this podcast. And yeah, I just think that there's something really deep there about going deep into your mind and finding what you are made of, and it is special on the wall. And it's why I don't know about you, Tim, but I've seen people climb V2, and it really takes every little bit of them in that moment, and it's always impressive. Like it's a beautiful thing to behold when you see someone really dig deep and find something new for that moment, regardless of the grade. And I think you've talked about this before, where when you do see some climbers who are younger or less experienced, less capable physically or grade wise, but you say, "Oh, this one's going to be good." Like, give them time. Like they've got they maybe
Totally.
they hit that speed bump early. They know how to try hard. And I just want to repeat one thing that you said to me earlier that ties right into this. It's just that be hungry, like not insecure, not critical, not judgmental. If you could only be one thing, it would be hungry. And I know you said this again before, or you said something similar before, but it just really gets to me because it's that when you really are hungry, and kids often have this better than adults, maybe just in their willingness to be open about being hungry versus hiding it secretly away. If you are hungry, you are willing to just hang it all out there and just try your best. And I think that that's something that really irritates me when I see I is when people are basically lying. And
Yeah.
it's one thing to lie to others, but actually the reason why it's bad to lie to others is because you end up lying. You end up not knowing if you can trust yourself. And I'm going to really make this story as anonymous as possible because it's not fair to share who I saw this on. Not that they're some kind of famous pro climber, but I saw them fall off of something and they thought people couldn't really see them. And the story that they told us was because a move was difficult or hard. I can't remember. They were tired, but it was very clearly that they were scared and they jumped off. And I always, it's funny how often I think about it because if they had come up to us and said, I was scared and I jumped off, it would have been like, yeah, scary up there, right? Like that was scary. I get it. But that's not what they said. They concocted a story about, the difficulty. And then all of a sudden, how do you set a goal and a training plan around that? Like, do you set around that theoretical move that you couldn't do, or do you actually recognize that it was because you were scared and you have to address that? And when we're talking about bringing that fire and that psych to the sessions, if you can't be objective, you can't be honest, then then in some ways it's hard to be hungry because you don't know what you're even hungry for. Like, are you? how do you decide what to do if you're not even being honest about where you're going wrong? And I just that's a that's another layer underneath all this is don't
Yeah,
lie. Don't lie yourself. And also you often say like be objective and don't let your emotions get in the way. And that's goes hand in hand. But at the very least, do not lie to yourself because you're
totally.
never going to get anywhere because you have no compass to follow.
Totally. That's such a deep, man, it gives me the chills actually, that statement, because I think early on everybody lies to themselves. Like everybody does, And the discovery of training and the discovery of climbing and the discovery of like your self progression truly is about that. It's checking yourself and basing it off of a place of a true north compass of, I want to progress and I just want to grow and that's it. And then you realize how hard it is. You realize that you have expectations. You realize all these things. I think that's, man, like I have a conversation I was having with recently with two of my youth clients was that my oddly enough, based on this conversation here, my most important thing for my clients is sustainability, is that they can put their shoes back on and keep doing it. Funny enough is that a lot of people will tell me that this elitist mentality is maybe the not sustainable approach. Like, no, no, the sustainable approach is actually enjoying yourself, but truly, authentically. That's genuinely enjoying what you do and having that progression. Lying to yourself is a quick way to not make this sport sustainable, right? Why do people lie to themselves? That's a really interesting thought there, right? Why do we base our sessions and base our progression and base our results off of other people? Why
Well,
do we base it off of why do we do that,
I
right?
can tell you why I think people do it is because if you're lying, you can always move the goalposts so that you don't have failure.
Yeah.
When you lie, you say, "Oh, I was just doing this," or "Oh, I didn't really want to do that. I didn't even mean this. It wasn't for me." And so this
Yeah.
is what's tricky about goals and being honest is that you set up the conditions for failure. And this is the thing though is you talked about this earlier is like you got to be able to say I suck or I sucked at this. Like
Yeah.
if you can't fail, then you can't get better, and you can't again you can't create a plan to address it unless you're willing to be honest and so yeah sorry I
Yeah.
cut in there, but
No,
that's
no.
my 2 cents on
Yeah.
that.
And I think I'm just answering like, all the devil's advocates out there for this kind of like more elitist mentality. The one that I hear a lot is also, like, but climbing, what if climbing's just for fun? It's like, damn right I'm having fun. That's why I'm doing it. That's what's fun about it. Like the movement itself of climbing is fun. It's super enjoyable. If I couldn't climb hard for the rest of my life and I couldn't push myself for the rest of my life, you're damn sure I'd still be climbing. It's super fun. It's enjoyable. But it's not enough for me, like I don't think it's enough for most people. I think kids are so honest with this and adults are a lot less honest with it. Kids are so, I mean, kids just tell you straight up that they want to grow. Kids straight up tell you that they want to do better, right? And then sometimes they realize that it's so difficult and then they tell you a lie that they don't want to do that anymore, right? And that's what you're saying is that they're moving their goalposts to meet where they're able to do something, but they don't realize that if they want to get to that impossible goalpost, that they have to do impossible things, and then they have to get out of the comfort zone. They have to do a lot. It's a twisted world we live in, guys. Everyone's changing. Every experience you go through, and everybody else might change your values, right? But going back to that original statement earlier, you need to make those for yourself. You need to make those standards for yourself. You need to understand what makes you happy. You need to understand truly deep down what's fun for you, right? What kind of what do you want? What kind of person do you want to be, right? And I'm not here to judge anybody. I don't care what people want, but I'm telling you a straight up black and white truth that one thing is this and another thing is this. If you want to grow and you want to have fun, that's actually this. But if you actually want to just sustain your mentality currently, maybe that requires some lying and maybe that requires some rule changing so that you can actually sustain what your mentality is currently. But it takes discomfort to change that mentality towards something that's actually going to be catered towards growth.
Yeah, I don't like the word fun. For a lot of stuff. I just think that God, that sounds terrible. I don't like it. I don't like the word fun. Well, I do think that it's a misnomer for what we should seek in life for climbing. Especially having kids changes the idea of fun. Like having kids is not fun. Does that mean you shouldn't do it? It's like what's fun? I like drinking. Like drinking alcohol is really fun. And I'm not saying I never drink, but should you build your life around that? Like, how many hours a week should you devote to drinking? And that devote, are you training to drink more? And so this is where, like, if you go climbing, like, I mean, I'm joking, but it's like, it's when
That's a
you
good
take
one.
those things to those extremes, that's the point. Is like, I do have fun climbing, and sometimes I go out and I'm just climbing kind of more for fun, and I just am romping around, and that's okay too. But I mean, I've been climbing for 30 years. Like, at, like at what point do you just be honest? Say like, okay, there's more depth to this than going out on the weekend and dicking around on rock. Like, I just don't kid yourself there. Again, it's like, don't lie to yourself. Like, clearly this means something more to me than just transient fun, because video games are more fun. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's more fun for me. Doesn't mean you can never have fun in climbing, but the best part of it is that it's a two-sided coin. Like, the harder it is, the less quote unquote fun it is in the moment, the more fun it is when things come together. And so it's that kind of delayed gratification. And I do think that there's something to be said for kids finding that out earlier. And it's nice to just show up and have fun and crush, but that's not really what life is like. We don't just kind of we or although some people do, but if you're just trying to follow the path of least resistance to have the most fun in life, good luck. Like, it doesn't quite work. Maybe you get to about your age, Tim, and then I mean, literally, I see people who are like that, probably around your age or a little bit
Mhm.
older, and they start getting real lost and kind of struggle. Where it's like, man, like, I have just been kind of going out and partying all the time, and now I'm kind of like
Totally.
not that psyched. And it's a little meta,
Totally.
but honestly, it applies to climbing and what we're doing
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. I think the reason why I've for me personally, and I know Josh has, thought this way as well. Um, but the reason why I'm able to, in my young life, like make these training goals and mindsets so that I can, provide my direction of progression. And granted, to be completely transparent with, everybody here, I'm still figuring it out, and I still have struggles too. I'm still asking myself regularly, do I actually really want to progress? Is it really worth it? Like, I still ask myself that. And it's not to tell myself no. It's just a genuine question. And I ask my youth clients this all the time. Hey, be really careful. Like, be super serious with yourself. Is this gonna be worth it to you in the end? I've chosen to look at my life as finite. My entire life, I've chosen to look at my life as finite. I know I'm gonna die. I know that my life will, I'm sorry, we're getting so deep here. I love
I like
it.
drinking, Tim.
um, I choose to look at my life as finite. I know it's gonna, but I've always looked at my life as a book. I've always looked at it, and I'll one day at the end look through this book and all the chapters, and I want to be psyched. That's what I want to be psyched on. I want to be psyched on my book, right? And my book is only formed by the choices that I make and how I make those choices. And I've always looked at my life this way. If you choose to look at your life this way, you'll be a little bit more real about if you want to do things or not, right? If something's worth it or not, right? And so for me, climbing hard was always worth it. And maybe right now it's not as much as it was when I was a kid, but it's kind of leaning a little bit more back towards worth it, right? I had this dip because I was questioning it, and then I answered the question, right? And that's where my insecurity went, was I'm not sure if it's actually what I want. And then I stopped doing it for a bit, and I was like, okay, it's what I want. Right now, I know. Now I know the difference. But it's important, if you want to live that way, if you want to actually choose the route of progression and actually choose the route of growth. It might be helpful to look at your life as finite and realize that you might have to make some choices to direct this book that you're going to have, right? And I don't judge anybody for not living that way. I'm not saying it's the right way to live. It's not. That's the way I live, and I like it, and it's helpful for progression.
Well, I'm pretty sure everyone should start looking at their life as finite, because it kind of is. So, as much
Because
as
it
I hate to
is.
say it. Okay, well, as we went into the deepest meta, as Tim and I do, I'm just going to pull it back as we start to close out, and just remind everyone that what the goal is here of having a goal. What the thing we're really trying to do is show up to each session and have a great fucking session. Like, do not half-ass it. Like, I mean, that's what it's all about. And as you start understanding why you're there, what you're doing, you can then find that psych, find that fire, tie it to your longer term vision, whether you're thinking about it on that finite full life scale or a smaller goal. It's just this goal is to not go in and just dick around and half-ass it. And but the kind of the stuff behind that is a little bit more than just telling yourself like, let's I want to try hard today. It's like that maybe works a few times, but tying it into something a little bit larger of a vision and how you do that is kind of what we went over today. And I just hope that I'm gonna go session right now, Tim. Actually, interestingly enough,
Nice.
it's just like I just you do not want to show up and bring your C game. It just doesn't work. Like no matter I don't know, honestly, no matter if we're talking about being a elite climber or whatever, just I almost feel like don't show up to anything and bring your C game. Just don't fucking go. Like just stay home.
Straight up.
And my pro tip though is kind of like the I don't know, almost like a cheat code for this. You shouldn't rely on, but I'm just gonna say caffeine is a hell of a drug. And I talked about that session I had a few days ago, and I just didn't want to go, man. I just didn't. I don't know. I can whatever the thing is, and sometimes having a cup of coffee, listen to some psych music, starting that warm up, just getting that ball rolling. I mean, this is why some people have a journal and they look at it and go like, "What am I here for a day? Oh yeah, I'm here for this. Oh yeah, like this is cool. This is what it's all about." And so anything you can do to kind of I know not every day is perfect. Maybe it's listen to this podcast and reminding yourself of like that
Mm.
deeper purpose. But I'll tell you what, man, caffeine can be quite a shortcut, but do not rely on it all the time. But if it has to be part of your ritual, I know I'm probably going to have a little espresso and get on the moon board. And, talking to you
Dude,
always helps that.
I wasn't gonna go to the gym, but I'm gonna go now.
Nice.
Well, I was gonna go and support Michaela, but I'm gonna work out now. I want to share one story. So I've only climbed once in the last month, and I don't actually plan on climbing much for the next week or so. And we got EOS membership to this gym. EOS it's like a regular gym, and
Regular gym? What do they do there?
yeah, like a regular gym. I
What do
don't
you
know.
mean
They just
regular
don't rock
gym?
climb. It's crazy, dude.
Huh.
They just do the weights. It's super weird. Like they
Like,
just do the weights and the running and like
hmm.
I don't know. I don't get it, but
Weights? What are
it's cheaper.
weights?
It's like a lot cheaper, so it's sweet, and you can still try it.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, we
Interesting.
started going to the regular gym. My knee's injured, and someone told me to do stationary cycling. It's good for the joints, and just it's good for doing it. And then I want to kind of get my upper body still staying strong and stuff. It's really hard to maintain the strength at a high level if you don't do it all the time. And we go to this gym and I don't personally I think I have a lot of like personal confidence and I don't mind being in tough situations. Like I don't know, I don't feel a judgment from people. I felt it at EOS, man. Like I walked in and I'm saying this because I imagine this is what a lot of climbers feel like. New climbers, I imagine this is what a lot of new climbers feel like. It was intimidating as hell, man. Like these people are literally, some of these guys are like 4 times my size.
Even though you're a
You know,
world class athlete, I mean, dude, you're literally a professional athlete. Like
dude, it doesn't
they're
matter.
fake.
Like
They
I'm
just
in
do bicep curls, man.
I'm in their wheelhouse though. Like,
Okay.
and I think this is the thing I'm trying to say is that like, uh, for me, I didn't feel that. But so Michaela asked me to go with her because she was like, it's just so intimidating there. It's just so. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I'll go with you. And I went and I was like, okay, I can feel this intimidation. And I'm just here to tell you that that intimidation is just totally fake. It's just exactly what Josh said. It's like, well, and for me, yeah, I guess I'm a world, but it doesn't matter. It's at the end of the day, it's just like, well, you're good at what you're good at, and that's they're good at that. They're good at the bicep curls, right? And I think I just want to remind everybody that it does not matter what people are good at. It does not matter how they intimidate you. You're there to do your thing. You're there to do your thing. You're allowed to do your thing. You're allowed to try as hard as you want. You're allowed to think about it as deeply as you want. You're allowed to fuck up. You're allowed to ask questions. You're also allowed to do those things. Just because everybody else there is perfect and they know what they're doing does not mean that you're not allowed to use the gym, right? And I think that's kind of where I needed to be reminded of that. I walked into EOS and I was like, dude, there's like 80 people in this small room and everybody is just so jacked and like, and it's like, yeah, I might be good at climbing, but I don't don't look necessarily like I belong in the gym, right? Like with my t-shirt on, you would not guess that I trained hard or anything. I'm strong, but I don't look strong. And I think, it's intimidating. It's a little bit, you judge yourself right away. But I was there for it, and that's where I at this podcast, kind of that's where that clarity came from. Is like, dude, I was there for one goal. One goal was to push myself, push my mind, push my body, and use whatever tools they gave me there to do that. And it does not matter what other people are doing. If that's what you're struggling with, guys, focus on yourself, focus on your goals, focus on that stuff, have fun, push yourselves, and hopefully it happens for you.
I think when you do push yourself and whatever metric that may be, that it gives you this confidence that you know what you're made of deep down inside. And I came from gymnastics, and I was a good gymnast. I was a better climber. I wasn't placing as high in gymnastics as I ended up doing in climbing, but I knew what I gave to the sport. Like I knew how hard I tried. And I just felt
So
like
good.
you just know. And it's why I don't know when we do. It's why I like doing some dangerous stuff sometimes too, because you just go, okay, I know what I'm like in the no fall zone. And it gives you this rock solid core where you're like, yeah, I may not be able to squat 400 pounds or whatever, but you go and you are next to those guys and you're like, no, I know what I'm made of though. And it does crack me up thinking about you in the gym. Like
Fuck
you're
off,
so just
Josh.
normal, dude. But that's just like you're normal. And even our best athletes, like if you saw our big athlete, like Jimmy Webb, if you saw him walking around, you'd be like, "What's up,
Damn, bro, hit the
normal
weights.
guy?" Yeah, like. But did I ever tell you? So I did Ninja Warrior, right? I've told you
Uh-huh.
I did Ninja Warrior. The reason why we wanted to do it, I did it with my buddy Ben, who's like a professional snowboarder, great climber, but just I just will never forget. And we did well. I'll never. The thing was is that we had this thing inside of us that there's people who look like athletes and there's people who are athletes, and it was always this thing. I mean, it's not like I'm super skinny. Well, I'm pretty darn skinny, but it's not like I'm, you know,
Yeah.
like a weakling. But I don't look like a bodybuilder. But I don't want to be a look like a bodybuilder. I want to
Right.
be. It's like it's not what you look like; it's what you are. And we did really well. There's all these people who look jacked, and you're just like, yeah, but what are you? And I just always think about that when I see people who are really big and muscular. I'm just like, I don't know. Somehow you can tell. You can like look at them and you're like, dude, what are you optimizing for? Like, what's your? And I guess I shouldn't judge, dude. I shouldn't like, but like, it is weird. It's like my North Star is to be swole, and you're just like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, I think that's why they often succumb to like steroids and stuff too, because it's just like,
Mm,
oh, this is your metric, and there's no like, what's the mastery that like, what's the deeper? I don't know, dude. I'm way off, and
yeah.
I'm like critiquing a bunch of bodybuilders
That's what we
for
do here at
yeah,
Testpiece. We
just
say, don't
talk,
go to EOS.
talk shit
Be
about
those guys.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I was that dude at like 18. I wanted to be big and strong, and I never really was. So there you go.
All right, guys. Happy New Year, everybody. Hopefully, everyone's fueled for their training. And yeah, well, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, happy New Year. I'm going to say one last thing because you pointed out at the gym and just going in and doing your thing. So I probably will get a day or two in Bishop in the next couple of weeks. And what's interesting is I want to do mandala sit, which is hard and going to be hard for me. But I also need to go and do juniors achievement. And so that's like a V7 or a V8 or something that's super thin. And it's going to be hard for me. Because I've tried in the past. And just my point is I am not good at juniors achievement. And if I walk up, either people will know me or they won't know me and they're going to be like, "Oh, like you're on this grade." And it's interesting where like you get judged but like I'm bad at it. I want to be better at it. Like I just do. Like so I have to go and try it. And so, whether your grade is V2, whether it's V12, whether it's V15, whether you're working on weakness or strength, just showing up and being willing to be there and be present and not lie yourself, not lie others. And so yeah, you might see me out there and I might be chuffing my way up an easy climb or I might be doing well on a hard climb, but all of it's about being honest and finding that deep desire to get better and by whatever means necessary other than steroids. All right, Tim,
All
good
right,
stuff.
Josh.
Happy
Good
New Year,
stuff,
my
man.
dude.
Happy New Year.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.